You're listening to the Racer to Racer podcast presented by Race 92. Race 92 is a vintage-inspired racing apparel brand specializing in celebrating vintage race culture and adapting to motorsports today. Check out race92.com for all your racing merchandise needs. I'm your co-host, Aaron McTee. Other co-host, you may have seen walking out of Barber Lounge 459 with a big old smile on his face. You may have seen him at a dirt track. He is Scott Bowie.
Hey Aaron, what's going on?
Not a whole lot. Just another week, and yeah, another month closer to May, right? May will be here before you know it.
Yep, April's almost here. Racing season started. 12 hours Sebring.
Yeah.
Ran over the weekend. Wow, last hour of that race was pretty hectic. David Land had really good coverage of it. So anybody wants to see any of that, go over to David Land's channel. And what else? What else happened this weekend? NASCAR. Joey Logano won in the Cup race. Brad Keselowski almost got a win, which I mean, he's slowly but surely has turned that team around. So good for him. He lost. Looked to me like he lost late in the race, maybe the last lap. Austin Hill won again in the Xfinity. Jeez, man, he's on a pace to win like 18 races or something like that this year, some insane number, which obviously is not going to happen. But man, he's had a heck of a start to the year.
Yeah, and I think we got to talk a little bit about that Xfinity race. And I forget. Let me see. Hold on. I got to get the name right.
Well, he went to NASCAR
Josh Williams. Josh Williams.
I don't know exactly what happened, but he got in trouble. Basically, they were trying to fix the car. They put him back out. Piece of Barabond comes off of it, causes another yellow, to which NASCAR decides they're going to enforce one of their rules that they barely enforce anymore. And I'm not sure what happened after that.
Well, they tell him to park it basically, and that's exactly what he did. I mean, that's what he did.
Well, I mean, where did he park it at? Was it on pit lane or was it on the track?
No, it was on the track at the start-finish line, in the middle of the track on the start-finish line.
Well, he's going to get some trouble for that.
Oh, I'm sure.
That's for anybody who thinks they can challenge NASCAR and not have repercussions. There is a history of some of the world's most famous NASCAR drivers who have learned the hard way that never works. So, but hey, it's good for the fans. It's funny.
Yeah. Yeah, he just parked it right there, the start finish line. It was near the bottom, near the apron, but it was basically right on the track there. And
Yeah, he was out
on
of
the
the way.
banking. On the banking, yeah, and he just got out of the car with his helmet, just walked across infield.
Wow.
Going home for the day from work.
Yeah, right. I think he got directed into the hauler before he could get in the car and drive home.
Well, no, you know what's funny is like the people that were coming up to him, were like NASCAR people. I thought, he was going to get in trouble, but they were actually coming up to him saying he needed to go to the infield care center because he was involved in yellow. So they were more worried about that at that point, which is good, I guess. But yeah, it's kind of funny.
That's funny. What else happened this weekend?
Formula One, Saudi
Formula One.
Arabia GP, and I did watch the majority of it. Fernando Alonso impressing once again with a third place. So another podium, third in the points. Great to see.
Yeah.
I like Fernando. I mean, anyone who's going to come over the Indy 500 like that and did what he did. I mean, he's a racer, right? So, 41 years old and still competitive.
Well, the crazy part is people were absolutely written him off.
Yeah.
As a race car driver. And I did make the comment one time to someone on social media a long time ago. I said, "Hey, if somebody's willing to back the Brinks truck up, he'll go back and run."
Oh yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. And I mean, he had good success at Alpine, and man, he is looking great right now. I mean,
It's
it's
good to
just
see because he definitely had some rough years. And it's good. I mean, someone of his caliber, obviously, sometimes I think people, like you said, when a driver like that has a couple bad years, like, oh, he's lost it. No, he
right.
didn't lose it. He's just not in equipment that can get it done.
Well, I mean, so you know, what's that say about what's going on with McLaren?
Yeah,
Uh,
McLaren's really, they had some issues in the race.
I mean, they were not good today, and
No,
they were so last year.
yeah.
The year before that, they were more competitive. I will say they were more competitive the year before that, but man, I mean, I don't know, man.
Well, the good
I mean,
news,
bottom line is they got to pick it up. I don't care. You are McLaren. You are one of the world's greatest racing
yeah.
organizations. You got to start acting like it. And right now they're not.
The good news is that they ever feel like their drivers, aren't meeting the quota. They definitely have plenty of other drivers they
Yeah,
can pick from
they can definitely put
development.
some.
So,
They definitely got drivers they can put in the cockpit. That's for sure.
and maybe that's part of their problem. Maybe they're just getting too big. I mean, they're getting involved in all these forms of motorsports. I mean, I wouldn't think it would have a direct, correlation with their Formula One team, but you never know, right?
Yeah, you don't know. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what's going on there, and I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. I'm just saying that when you are one of the world's greatest racing teams, at some point you got to start acting like it. And right now they're not. Um, I mean, I guess you could say the same thing for Mercedes, although Mercedes is running in the top six, Ferrari's running in the top six in an ultra competitive series. So, um, they're not where they want to be, but they're competitive each week.
Yeah, absolutely.
But certainly you got to hand it to Sergio Perez. Wins another one. Really wasn't even close. Verstappen obviously second. Alonso was third.
Well, Verstappen had the gear. I think it was the gearbox issue that ended him
Yeah,
out of the one qualifying session, so he started like 15th. So
right.
still pretty impressive. But obviously, he
Oh,
moved he
absolutely.
moved he moved up pretty quick. Obviously, he's got the fastest car, but
Right.
yeah,
The funny part with Orlando, Alonso was, they had the 5-second penalty for the grid violation,
yeah,
and then they served it under the yellow, and then he got the 10-second after the race that put him fourth, but then he rescinded the 10-second and moved him back to third. So who knows, man?
yeah. No, you never know with with that. But other than that, we have IndyCar Texas coming up. That's this week or the next week?
I'm not sure which. I
Yeah,
am so screwed up on my
I am
dates right
too.
now.
It's coming up, and then after that we have Barber. And then yeah, I mean, and then we'll be in May before you know it.
Yeah,
Like you
Indy
said earlier.
next. Well, you got Long Beach as well.
Long
Yeah,
Beach,
Long
yeah.
Beach. Indy next has a tested speedway in 2 weeks. Um, that'll be interesting. Man, that's a competitive field. I went back and watched some of the race from St. Pete, and wow, I mean, 19 cars, and there's probably 15 drivers, 14 drivers
Mhm.
that can get it done. And there's actually there. I mean, there's probably 17 cars that can get it done, and probably 14 drivers that can get it done.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But other than that, like the guest this week we're releasing is Brian Till, and we talked about Brian a little bit before, but Brian, great guy and very,
Yeah,
I definitely enjoy all of our interviews, but that's like the disclaimer you have to say, right? I enjoy talking to everyone, but no, I really do. But if there's a few that I would say really stand out, I would probably say this would be one of them, just because he's just really, really good at talking, just very reflective and just honest and realistic. Um, and it just, he's just very reflective, like just kind of reflecting back about how lucky he was and how fortunate he was to be given the opportunities that he was given. And it was just really cool really cool interview. And I mean, he is a professional at speaking, I guess you can say, because he's been doing TV for quite some time. So those guys are always, pretty easy to talk to, and just really good interview. But Brian's a great guy, and like I said, it was just really good one.
Yeah, I can't agree more. That was really really good. Yeah, I mean that's all you can say about it. It's just really really I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and then I think the next one will probably be Didier Tays will release, or we may be doing a McGilvery show, I believe on the Tuesday the 28th. We'll wait to confirm that when we get closer. But yeah, other than that, thanks to Fast Times Indoor Karting, we've been doing a couple more of the Pro vs. Joe's video series. We just did. So the next one I'll be releasing will be Sebastian Severde, which was you weren't there for that one, Scott, but that was a really good one. Sebastian's been there before, so he's obviously pretty quick. I mean, regardless, he's pretty quick. But
Right.
yeah, I think everyone will enjoy that. And then the one after that, won't say who it is yet, but it is a current IndyCar driver. You were there for that. Got a little bit of schooling from we've raced against former IndyCar drivers. They're nothing to mess with, but obviously a current IndyCar driver, probably a little bit more on their game because they're more fresh and current. And yeah, nothing to mess with for sure.
No, I mean he was great. The one you did last week was great,
Yeah.
or this past week, with another current driver. We're not going to give away who it is, but hugely successful in his field and very good at fast times. So no, that was really good. Really enjoyed that one as well.
Yeah, so thanks to Fast Times for, letting us do this, and hopefully we can help promote Fast Times a lot more once we do more of these. And yeah, it's really opening the door, and we're able to get people that I didn't think we'd be able to get. So it's yeah, it's pretty cool. I think everyone will enjoy the videos that are coming out soon. And other than that, it's getting, so it's been cold, Scott, but here in probably about a month, you're going to need to switch gears. And thanks to the good folks, good guys, you're covering all bases.
I am absolutely covered. I am incredibly confident going into the air conditioning season. They really come in and did a quick job and did an awesome job for me last year when my old unit just finally gave up the ghost. So the good people, good guys. Anybody needs checkups, if they're having issues, please look them up. They're in the Indianapolis area. Ryan and the people there do just excellent work. So yeah, no, I that is one stressor that I don't have to worry about right now. Is that
Yeah, the less stress as you can have, the better, right?
that's right.
But no, other than that, thanks, Eric. And I will mention, so Race 92, obviously I mentioned that a little bit. We will definitely stay tuned to race92.com. We're working on a couple things I think people will be pretty excited about. I'm pretty excited about it. So some pretty big things, trying to kind of revitalize the brand and have a couple new connection, or well, at least one pretty big collection that'll be coming out soon. Working on that kind of in the back end the next couple weeks. But yeah, stay tuned for that. And yeah, hope everyone has a great week, and I hope everyone enjoys Brian Till interview.
Take care, bye.
Our guest today drove in the 1994 Indy 500 and is a longtime broadcast. Sorry, let me redo that. Our guest today drove in the 1994 Indy 500 and is a longtime broadcaster for IMSA and other forms of motorsports. We are joined by Brian Till. Brian, it's great to have you on the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
We're doing great. So I gotta be honest, this is our first episode of Cooking with Brian Till. Brian, what are we making tonight?
Well, we're having a spicy spaghetti sauce, so a spicy red sauce, and then I'm going to serve it on both spaghetti and ravioli. And no, I did not make the ravioli.
I like this man. I like this man a lot.
But I am making the sauce, and that means there's going to be a bottle of red wine that's opened here shortly. So it's just, and I'm not going to tell you how much goes in the sauce and how much goes in the sauce maker, but
Baker. That's funny. So obviously you're race car driver and also got into broadcasting, and we've interviewed some other people just like you. Obviously Scott Goodyear, we've had Paul Page on. So it's great talking to
you had the man on. If you had Paul Page on,
I
he's
know,
like
right?
the guy. Man, I mean, Paul's just as you guys know. I mean, you talk to him, super guy, very down to earth, very transparent, has some great racing and non-racing stories. I don't know if you got into any of the non-racing stories, but
Most of them are Bobby
bit.
Unser stories. Most of them are Bobby Unser stories.
So, Paul has a military background. I know we want to talk about racing, but he's got an interesting military background. Ask him about it next time you bump into him. That's all I'll say.
He's talked a little bit about his military background with us. So talk a little bit about how you first got interested in racing.
Oh man, and I say this to young kids all the time. I mean, I'm one in a million, and I don't mean that as in I'm a really special guy. I mean it as in I won the lottery. I'm never going to win like Powerball because I won it already. Nobody in my family raced. I'm from Houston, Texas. And like I said, nobody in my family raced. My father was an attorney, and he grew up in Appleby, Texas, which no one knows where it is. It's north of Houston on the way up to Nacogdoches and stuff like that in East Texas. And he literally grew up in a 2-room house as an only child, not a 2-bedroom house, a 2-room house. And long story short, family moved to Houston, went to high school, got out, went to the Navy, used the GI Bill, paid for college, read light meters at Houston Lighting and Power to pay for law school, and became a very well-known, very well-respected insurance defense attorney, not only in Houston and in Texas, but throughout the country. So he knew nothing about racing. But what he wanted was for us, even though we had a very comfortable living at that point in time, growing up as kids, we weren't growing up in a 2-room house. He wanted us to understand where he came from. So we had a farm, and we had cows, and we had horses, and we had a garden, and, all that comes with that. So we learned, to grow up the way that he did. We also had a go-kart. And it was, a 5 horsepower Briggs and Stratton engine on it, and it had slick tires, but we drove it in the grass because, you drove it around the yard. And I just started kind of thinking that this was really cool. So I drove the go-kart. I would take our big walk behind Yazoo mower and mow racetracks out in pasture. And I finally convinced my dad to buy me a helmet. And I wasn't because I was concerned about going through the barbed wire fences that separated the pastures. It was to keep the cow pies out of my face. I wanted a helmet with a shield on it because I got tired of being strewn, and you try to miss the fresh ones. The dried ones weren't a problem. But and so that's where I really kind of fell in love with it by accident. And I never expected to be a professional race car driver. When I was late in high school, met a guy that I played baseball with, and became one of my very best friends to this day. And his dad raced in the SCCA at the club level. And so Bobby and I started going to the races when we were seniors in high school. And we continued to do that when we were in college. In the summer times, we'd go help his dad at the racetrack on the weekends. And I just always thought, when I graduate from college and I'm making all that money that you make as soon as you graduate from college, I'm going to buy a race car and go racing too. And then my second year of college, I was like, when you're making a decent amount of money, by the time I finally got out, it was like, if I just have a job, I'll buy tickets to a race somewhere. So the dream of driving kind of went away. But then I discovered one weekend, I guess it was my junior year of college, I was driving around town. I was out at the airport actually taking flying lessons. And I was a big Formula One fan, big race fan. And I knew that all these Formula One drivers got their starts driving go-karts. And I knew kind of a little bit about go-karts, but I was out at the airport on a weekend, which I rarely was. And as I was leaving, there's a go-kart track there by the airport in Waco. And I happened to drive by it and they were racing. And I was like, oh man, I got to see this. So I drove in and I climbed up in the stands and the first couple of carts came out, and zipping around. And I was like, this is insane. This is crazy. These guys, they're up on two wheels. My God, you could die doing this. I got to have one. So I literally got a job that my parents didn't know I had. I had a Toyota Celica hatchback. The go-kart fit perfectly in the back of the Toyota when the back seats were folded down. It lived in my apartment. I would go to the track. I would take it out of the car, wheel it up to the apartment, stand it on its rear bumper, slide it through the door, and then put it on its cart stand in the middle of the living room. And I started racing. I raced all around Texas in my go-kart and my Toyota and my parent for a year and a half before my parents eventually found out. So, and again, all I wanted to do was just racing the SCCA. I just wanted to be a club racer, but the hook was firmly set and I was done. It was like, I'm going to go racing. And the guy, my best friend's dad, said when I graduated, tell you what, if your parents will send you to a 3-day racing school like a Skip Barber or Jim Russell at the time or Bob Bondurant, I'll let you drive my race car in an SCCA school so you can get your license. And he did that, and it was kind of off to the races. The biggest problem was about, when was it? It was 9 months into my SCCA club racing career. My father had a heart attack at the hunting lease in South Texas and fell over dead. So I just kind of thought, I'm pretty good at this. And I didn't have anybody to kick me in the butt and tell me I couldn't. And I was dumb enough to believe I could. And I sold basically everything I owned. And much to my mother's chagrin, I headed out and started a professional racing career. And the reason I say I'm 1 in a million is because I should have never made it. Statistically speaking, I should have never made it. There are a lot of guys that were better race car drivers than me. And that's what I say to people all the time. This is not a stick and ball sport where talent necessarily gets you there. It's about the brakes and being in the right place at the right time. It's about understanding that it's a sport, but it's a business. And, when you head into it in the beginning, you think of it in these romantic, idyllic terms of, if I just win races, somebody will hire me. And for some reason, I ended up in the right place in the right time and met the right people and had opportunities to do things that I never dreamt that I would have the opportunity to do back in the very beginning when it all started out. I know that was a really long answer to a really short question, but that's it. And, that's how I got to do the things that I have been so fortunate to do. And, it's like I said, I know people who I raced with that probably had more natural talent, but for one reason or another, never found the right people, never found the right supporters, were never able to get the business side of it sorted. And consequently, they didn't end up with the same opportunities that I had. And, it's sad, but it's as bad as it sounds. That's the way this business works. So there you go.
Yeah, I'd say that that's about as good an example we've heard as far as having the resolve to do it, and then just going through and not only following your dreams, but being wise enough to make the choices that kept perpetuating your career.
Well, and wise and my name are two words that rarely go together in the same sentence. But no, I think it was different because I didn't have that passion my entire life. I looked at everything, every step that I was fortunate enough to get to take, that next step. I looked at it as a blessing. I didn't look at it like it was owed to me. I looked at it with awe. And, I remember being in Waco, Texas in a go-kart shop, and they had they also stored some stuff for some drag racers in town, and they had an IndyCar show car in the shop. And I said to the guy who was building my engine, who worked there, I said, "Oh my God, is that an Indy car? It looks so much smaller than I thought it would be." He's like, "Yeah." And I said, "Can I sit in it?" And he goes, "No." So, and I thought, standing there in that go-kart shop in 1980 or 81, whatever it was, that was probably the only opportunity I would ever have to sit in an Indy car. I had no even dreams about sitting in an Indy car. I wanted to drive my go-kart and then a Formula Ford in the SCCA. So for me, literally every opportunity I got was a blessing. And I know for a lot of other people, there are people in this sport that when they didn't get opportunities, they were bitter because they had worked so hard. And why am I not getting this? And so on and so forth. And it's like, because it's not fair, and I don't know. It's somebody asked me at Daytona, how good are the champions? How good are the guys, the Scott Dixons of the world? Let's say, how good were the Sennas and Schumacher and Hamilton and all of these guys? Picking Jimmy Johnson, and I said, they're really good. It's that way in every sport. They're almost on a freakish level, I was never going to be that person. I was never going to be an IndyCar champion ever. I mean, and maybe I wasn't, because I would look in the mirror and say, I don't have that ability, because I didn't. You can lie to yourself as easily as you can speak the truth to yourself, probably easier. But I could hold my own and I could do okay. I told somebody that, yeah, I probably could have been a top 5 championship driver with a little more time and the right team, but I was never going to win. Maybe I would have collected a couple of wins in races along the way. I was that player on the team that could do everything and could do it okay, but I wasn't a standout. I wasn't an Aaron Judge. I wasn't a Hank Aaron. I wasn't one of those guys in baseball. I just wasn't. And to the guys that are up front week in and week out, they're freakish. I mean, I know that sounds crazy to say, but they're freakishly good. And if you just watch onboard cameras, I mean, I love to watch onboard cameras, and probably because I know what the feeling is in the car, I can relate to the onboard camera easier and more completely than somebody who's never driven a race car, right? So I can just sit there and see the little things and admire the little things that those people do that maybe I couldn't have. And, when you're talking about an IndyCar at the Speedway, or going through turn 1 at Mid-Ohio, or turn 1 at Road America, or whatever, I mean, pick a corner that's kind of daunting. It's even the guys in the middle of the pack are really good. I always laughed when I ran in kart in the early 90s. With year-old equipment, your goal was to qualify somewhere between 13th and 15th. It just was. I mean, you weren't going to be better than 13th. You just weren't, unless somebody had a really bad day, popped an engine in qualifying before they got a lap in or something like that. It was current, and then it was year-old stuff. And if you wanted to be on the pole of the year-old stuff. Now, you could race your way into the top 10, because at the time, with the engine wars and stuff like that, everybody boosted up for qualifying except the year-old guys, and then in the race, they would have to go back down. I say boosted up, they run more RPM and stuff like that. The boost was set, but they would spool them up, and so they would get more performance. So you were never going to be with those guys, never. But in the race, when they had to lower the RPM back to get the engine to live for the length of the race, you could race with them. And so the racing side of it was fun, but still you had to be realistic about where you would be. If you were within a second and a half to 2 seconds of the pole, you were 13th to 15th and you did a really good job. What's the difference between first and last on an IndyCar grid on a road course today? It's not a second and a half or 2 seconds.
No,
it's less than that. So even the guys that are, quote, mid-pack are good. And a lot of times you look at really talented drivers in mid-pack. That's just how close it is these days with the cars that they run. But the guys up front are, they're freakishly good.
So
consistently freakishly good.
Oh no, no, absolutely. So, you talk a little bit about, never really thinking you would have a shot at IndyCar. So you make it, or kart at that point. Sorry. So you make it a kart, and a question I ask a lot of drivers is, did you have like a welcome to the big leagues moment, like something that happened? For example, like Jimmy Kite, he talked about his first race. He was driving in the pits, and he looked up and saw, like pit board of Ari Lyondike, a lot of his heroes that, he grew up watching, and it was just surreal to him. And I'm guessing, since you never thought you would have ever made it IndyCar, getting to race against someone like Mario Andretti would probably feel pretty surreal to you.
Oh, it was. I mean, my first IndyCar race, my first kart race was 1992 at the Long Beach Grand Prix. And I had run at Long Beach in Atlantic. I finished second in 1990 in the Atlantic race there. And I don't think I had a very stellar Indy Lights race in 91. I don't remember. So it must not have been very good. But that was my first IndyCar race. And I mean, we had a lot to do. We ran the year-old True Sports chassis with the Judd power plant. And it was a bit of a maintenance struggle. We split a gearbox case in half in, like, I think the first practice session, and they had to fly another one in from Columbus overnight. And so we didn't run a lot on Friday. And then on Saturday, we got out there more. But we did the right thing. We ran on a track that we knew, although it probably wasn't a good thing to run on a street course, although I did manage to keep it off the walls. But that moment that you were asking about was the driver's briefing. It was a driver's meeting, and it was in the aquarium building that's there down. It's still in the same room that I think it always was. But, I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my God, there's Mario Andretti. There's Michael Andretti. There's Rick Mears. There's Emerson Fittipaldi. There's Al Unser Jr. And look back at 1992 and run down the list of people that were there. It was awe inspiring. And then Wally Dallenbach was, the race director, chief steward, and he's leading the meeting. And, just they had such great relationships. The drivers had been there, and Wally had such great relationships. And Mario comes in, and Wally starts the meeting, and Mario goes, and I'll try his accent, but it's going to be horrible. But anyway, Mario goes, Wally, why do we do the driver's briefing here? I had to come past all these people on my scooter, and they want my autograph, and it just, it just takes so much time. And I'm like, nobody asked me for my autograph. I'm like, well, I'm sitting there thinking I got in without a problem, what? Yeah. And then I'm like, oh, Mario. But just that was the moment, sitting in that driver briefing going, being on the racetrack was one thing, but being in the room with all of those people, Bobby Rahal, who at the time, when you got your kart license, you had to go do a 2-day rookie test. Johnny Rutherford went with us, or met us down in Sebring, and spent 2 days watching me drive an IndyCar to sign off so that you could get a license. And then you had to have 2 current IndyCar drivers sign off underneath whoever witnessed the test, saying they are willing to be on the racetrack with you. That doesn't happen anymore. Right. But at the time, that's what it took to get on the racetrack. And so I'm like, there's Bobby Rahal. I was living in Columbus, Ohio, and I still am. But, I went over to Bobby's office, and he's like, okay, yeah, I'll sign it. Be good, be safe. You'll do fine, kind of thing. And I'm like, freaking Bobby Rahal signed my license. I can't remember who the second person was, but, it was just a unbelievably cool time to be in kart, and to sit there in that room with those drivers. It was just, I was kind of gobstruck, it was awesome. Absolutely awesome.
Yeah. The amount of talent that was in kart at that time. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. I picked a really bad time to be there.
It was,
And then, like some guy named Nigel came
legends.
in, and
We're talking about legends. Legend after legend after legend.
yeah, and you talk about '94, which is the only year that I attempted and ran the 500. Rick Mears did rookie orientation that year, and he sat in the right front seat of a car with you and drove you and let you drive him around the speedway while he said, "All right, turn there, turn there, turn there." And I'm like, I'm freaking driving Rick Mears around the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I mean, it was an awesome time. I mean, and it's not that it's not now, and I'm old and live in the past to do all those things that old people do, I guess. But I look at it and I go, find me a better time. Find me a better time. Right now, it's pretty good, I'll tell you. And I'm glad to see that. I think it's gotten back to kind of where we were, in the early 90s when it was so good. And it's great to see. I will admit there was a period of years I didn't watch much IndyCar racing. It just didn't interest me. But now you've got some personalities, and the racing is incredibly tight, and it's great fun to watch.
Well, you have some. I mean, you got one of the best ever in Scott Dixon. Newgarden and young guys like Pato, and I mean, I obviously could go on and on. Scott McLaughlin, and along with Will Power, who's another legend of the sport, and
Little Herta.
Right. I mean, it's a great time. It's a great time, personality wise and driver wise for IndyCar. That's for sure.
Well, and I think that the drivers and the racing that's there is great, but from a personality standpoint, there are personalities in the paddock,
right?
Again, that make it interesting, that make it worthwhile, and you have to have a personality now. You just have to. You have to care about the social networking and social media, and you have to care about that. Your sponsors demand that you do, and the sport kind of demands that you do, and I think that's the thing that so many of these guys, really all of them, have done so well with, is recognizing that side of it. It's not just about driving the car anymore. It's so much more than that. And there are some people that go, well, that sucks, it should all be about driving the car. And it's like, no.
Well, I would say that you with this, as you mentioned, social media and all that, I feel like you have to be, I mean, more than any time in a long time, you have to be who you are, because people can sense if you're not who you are, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's I really think that's the thing, and I do believe that's what I mean, obviously you're alluding to, and that's what we're seeing, and we see it in the Indy Next group, and we see it in Indy Pro. So I mean, they're coming along. People aren't afraid to be who they are. There for a long time, everybody was worried about being, afraid of being themselves, I think, because they didn't want to say the wrong thing. They didn't want to do the wrong thing.
Well, that certainly exists now too, right?
Well, yeah, no, it does, just in a different way. Right.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
You're right.
Yeah.
Remember when, and he is real, but remember years ago when everybody was like, oh, Elio's just a big fake. That's all a show. And it's like, that's not a show. You can bump into him in the race shop or something like that when there's no audience around. And that's Elio. I mean, that's just him. He is that outgoing, that gregarious, that just high strung. You talk to Mike Shank about him, and he's like, oh yeah, no, that's him.
Right.
It's real easy to go, no, that's not him, but it is. And I think other people have realized too that you want people to know who you are, right? I mean, anymore, you want people to know who you are and recognize you and act on whether they like you or not. Be somebody that people don't like. That's okay, right? In fact, Dale Earnhardt Jr. made a great career out of not being liked by a lot of people. And I think you're right, though. I think people tiptoed around it for a long time, and now it's like, no, be yourself and sell yourself, right?
I agree. I like, you think like somebody like Juan Montoya, whether you like him or don't like him, he is who he is, and he is unapologetic about it.
Yeah,
and
he
that's
doesn't
actually
care.
what makes me. Yeah, and that's what makes me like him, because he won't go along with anybody's like kind of dancing around things. He'll just go right to it.
Oh no, yeah, I've run into that professionally, and
Sure.
not that Juan's a pain to deal with by any stretch of the imagination, but you'd better be prepared when you go talk to him, because he's got things to do. And if he's unhappy that you're taking too much time, you will know it. And it's his time. And when you deal with these guys at the racetrack, it is their time, and it is complicated, and you do have to be respectful of that. And Juan is not concerned at all about your feelings or anybody else's feelings when you talk to him in an interview. He has no qualms about calling somebody out, as we all know, on the racetrack that he thinks has done something wrong or stupid or whatever. And you know what? To some extent, he certainly earned the right to do that.
Absolutely.
A little bit of talent there.
Yeah. There's just a little bit.
Scott actually had a cat named Juan Pablo, and he was pretty similar, right?
He was it's the only cat I ever had only animal I've ever owned I just had a business relationship with. He was just
I'm scared to dig into that one too far.
He just did what he did. I did what I did. I brought home the food, took care of him.
He would occasionally say thank you.
But occasionally, yes.
How funny.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, his personality. Yeah, oddly, I don't know Juan, but I got a feeling it'd be somewhat similar.
And let me make this abundantly clear, because obviously we didn't in a broadcast a few years ago when he was running with Roger in the Acura. We were talking about Juan being mad. Calvin Fish and I were doing the broadcast. We were talking about Juan being upset at somebody. Something had happened, and he was in the car. I was like, man, you don't want a ticked off Juan Montoya behind you. And we kind of chuckled about that. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, everybody knows that Juan's kind of a fiery character, right? I mean, I didn't think that would be, and I certainly didn't say, he's a jerk for having a personality,
Right.
But a family member took offense to that. And I'm like, no. I admire him and respect him immensely. I'm not saying he's a jerk, I'm just saying he's a warrior, right? I mean, and you don't want to tick him off. And if you go by the mantra of drive people the way you want to be driven, if you drove JPM dirty, well, guess what?
That's right.
It's going to come back. And so that's all we were saying. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows that I have a massive amount of respect for him and not making fun of him by any stretch of the imagination.
When I saw him win the 500 that first time in such a dominating fashion, I thought to myself, this may be the greatest race car driver I'm ever going to watch in my lifetime. And I'd seen a lot of great race car drivers. I'm 53, but I grew up in the sport. So I was lucky enough to see Rick, and I actually got a chance to watch AJ run a little dirt, Mario run a little dirt.
Oh wow!
As a little kid, and so I just thought Montoya was just something really special. I still do. I have a great admiration for his abilities.
And it's funny. You talk to Mike Hall at Ganassi, and he talks about what a natural Juan was. He said, in the beginning, and I have no idea, what he's like now, but he said, in the beginning working with Juan, it was it could be frustrating at times because he just drove it,
Mhm.
right? He didn't fix it. He just
Right.
drove it. And they're like, well, what do you need? Well, hang on a second. Give me a lap. Okay, I got it. Well, no. What do you need? What can we do to make it better? You know, he's so good at just adjusting to what the car needs. Mike was talking about being in an oval somewhere where they came in, did a pit stop, and went out, and his times were just abysmal after the stop, and he was dropping back in the race. And you know, they were on the radio going, Juan, what's up? What's wrong with the car? Give me a minute. You know, he had run 2, 3, 4 laps. They were like, he's like, give me a minute. And the next lap was quicker. The next lap was quicker. And like 5 or 6 laps in, he's right back down to where he had been when the car was, quote, good. But he made it good. He didn't make it good by making adjustments and this, that, and the other. He made it good or made it work by driving it in a completely different way, in a completely different place. And on an oval, that's Herculean.
Right.
I mean, because I always tell, you know, young drivers on an oval, and you know this, I mean, being the race fan that you are, on an oval, it's the car. I mean, certainly at the certainly at the speedway, if the car's not going to do it, you can't pitch it, catch it, play with it, this, that, and the other, like you can on a street circuit or a road course, because it'll kill you. I mean, the car has to be right. And granted, when you've got a car that's right with somebody who's really good in it, it's magical. But you know, to take a car, it wasn't at the speedway, so it must have been a shorter oval, and you can manhandle them a little bit more on a short oval. But Mike said he was just amazed. You're sitting there watching him. He's running the car in a completely different place, but turning the same lap times because that's what the car needed. Juan didn't care what Juan needed. Juan just drove the car the way it needed to be driven. So, yeah, I mean, mega talent.
Yeah, I mean, that's rare air, right?
Yeah. Oh, well, that's what I was saying in the beginning. The great ones,
right?
It is. You know, it's not the guy that gets a hold of the 100-mile-an-hour fastball and hits one home run. It's the guy that does it every single time he steps up to the plate, or every third time he steps up to the plate in good baseball number terms. But yeah, those are the guys that are special. And you know, the thing that's crazy about it is probably, I guess, what I just said. It's the consistency of doing the special things. You know, the quote good race car drivers, not the great ones. Good ones do special things. They just don't do them as often, right? The great ones just do it all the time, you know, consistently. So,
no, I couldn't agree more. You look at someone like Scott Dixon, who after all these years still makes more fuel than everybody else, and they all have the same technology. They have everything's the same. So
and it doesn't matter what he's driving. You know, he slots into a prototype and does the same thing. It's just, and I mean, Scott's the guy, and I say this a lot, and I did a program for the Lucas School of Racing the week or the 2 days after the Rolex 24, and I told these young guys the same thing, you know, and Scott's this guy, and that is there's confident and there's cocky. I'll take confident all day long. Cocky, I don't want to deal with. I don't want your attitude. And that's Scott, right? He's confident. Have I seen him angry? Yeah, I've seen him angry, but I didn't see him having a temper tantrum like a spoiled child would have. I saw him angry because he wanted to be better. I didn't see him cocky. You watch the wins and the championships. He doesn't get out of the car and dance a jig and throw his fists up in the air and say, I'm number one. He gets out of the car and thanks the team and is elated by the success that they're all having together. And that's confident. That's not cocky. And with all the success, as you were saying, with all the success that he's had, and will continue to have really kind of as long as he wants to keep driving, I guess, it's just, those are the things that are special. Again, you know, those guys.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I contend that in any sport, the great ones, career is probably done 5 years before anybody else knows it.
Oh yeah.
Like they know the changes they're having to make, but other people don't.
Yep. And that's a great point. And they make them quietly.
Right. That's right.
Not, but they find a way to adjust and get it done. And
Right.
that's the thing it's one of the other things that makes them special.
So talking a little bit about, so we're obviously talking about the Indy 500 and your only Indy 500 in 1994. But obviously I'm sure Indy 500 was something you were very familiar with, you watched, you knew it was a big deal, but kind of take us through that month and kind of what your impression of actually getting to experience it really was for you.
There are two racetracks in the world that give me goosebumps when I walk into the pit lane. And I know Mr. France is going to hate me for this, but it's the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and Circuit de la Sarthe 20, where they run Le Mans. And it sounds, maybe it sounds corny. I don't know. But I say this to everybody. It's like you walk into those two places and you almost literally feel the spirits and the ghosts of the people who've been there, and that have literally given everything. I remember a few years ago when somebody was trying to, reason that less than 33 starters at Indy wasn't a big deal. And I'm sitting there thinking, it is a big deal.
Yep.
That's the freaking number. I know people who have died trying to be one of 33, literally died trying to be one of 33. Don't tell me it's just a number. It's special, and all of that was there. But it was also a very emotional time for me, because I wanted to do well and I thought I could. And, we struggled a little bit. We were with Dale, and, Dale's operation at the time was nothing like Dale's operation is now. And it was nothing like it had been in the years ahead of it. He was growing by leaps and bounds and, producing better and better cars. And they had been running, Buicks for the last several years. This was the first year they had, what I would call a mainstream engine. It was a Ford. It was a year-old Lola with a Ford. So the opportunity to be in the show was there. But I woke up in my hotel room one morning and was getting ready to go to the racetrack, and I just happened to turn the news on, and the news that came on, it was on every news station around and probably in the world, was that Ayrton Senna had just died. And I'm thinking, hang on a second. If the best race car driver in the world, certainly at the time, and maybe, depends on who you are and what you like to believe, but if Ayrton Senna just died in a race car, what the hell am I doing driving a car at 230 miles an hour around the Indianapolis Motor Speedway? Right. So it was emotional because Senna was gone. It was a wake-up call that, we all put our suit on and our helmet on, and I would imagine it's the same way to this day. But you put your suit and helmet on, and the thought of something bad happening just goes away for some reason. It's like Nomex makes that thought go away. I won't tell you that I've never been scared in a race car, and I won't tell you that I was never scared at Indianapolis. But I always tell young kids too, if a race car driver tells you he's never been scared in a race car, he's either a liar or a fool. At some point in time, you're going to scare yourself in a race car. You can't drive with fear or worry, but a little healthy respect, is probably a good thing. And the idea that Senna had been killed was really, a huge deal from a wake-up call perspective, but because the great was gone and you were doing the same kind of thing, and it just kind of added, I don't know, it just kind of added a different kind of tone to the whole thing all month long. And then, there was, my mom and my little sister didn't come to the race. My little sister was pregnant at the time and about to deliver, so she couldn't be at the racetrack, and my mom stayed at home with her. But my brother and my older sister and their spouses came, and it was, and then there's the pressure that you put on yourself of, hey, you need to do a good job for you. Then there's the pressure you put on yourself of, I need to do a good job for these people who came to watch. I need to do a good job for the people who have sponsored me and supported me and gotten me here. But I'll also tell you, there was the very real thought in my mind. I was 34 years old. There's a very real thought in my mind of this. I mean, there's better than a 50-50 shot that this is it. You're not going to get to do this again, And so all of that kind of goes through your mind. And I remember there are parts of the month that I don't remember very well at all, and other parts that I remember clearly. I clearly remember the start of the race. I started 21st. So on the 7th row, Robbie Gordon was beside me. I think Guerrero may have been back there. So there were good race car drivers around me. And I remember coming out of turn 4 and you couldn't breathe. Remember, we ran methanol at the time, and the amount, the engines, you didn't have cockpit adjustable engine maps and so on and so forth. And so everybody's loaded up and the engines are real rich. And if you remember being around Indy cars back in the day when that fuel was, it just burns your nose to be around it, to breathe the fumes of it. Let me tell you, when you come out of there and there are 18 cars in front of you that have gone to full chat and the engines were loaded up and it dumps that exhaust out, it was just hanging on the front straightaway. And it was like hard to breathe until you got out of turn 2. It was just this choking methanol exhaust. But, that exhaust smell to me is, I'm going to bring up my Texas roots and my age, obviously. We hunted all the time when I was a kid. I mean, we hunted everything: ducks, geese, dove, quail, deer, pigs, you name it. But I remember as a little kid, our shotgun shells were made of paper. And those paper shotgun shells, even the first plastic shotgun shells, had cork base wads down at the bottom of the shotgun shell. And I can remember whenever I would shoot, or my dad would shoot, I would pick up that paper shotgun shell and smell it, because it just had, I don't know, something about that. It was pungent, but it smelled good. And it's kind of like methanol exhaust. There was just something about it. It burned your nose, it burned your eyes, but there was just kind of a magic to it. Kind of like 2-stroke go-kart fuel. You'd smell it at a racetrack, or you could, if you smelled it outside a racetrack, you would go, oh, somebody's burning, clots or whatever it was that you mixed at the time, because you just knew the smell of it. But I mean, like I said, it was magic, and there were highs and lows. And I said to my girlfriend at the time, who I eventually married, when we walked through Gasoline Alley out to the track, before the race, I just said, look around and enjoy it. You may never see this again. And I vividly remember saying that. And I vividly remember the walk out of Gasoline Alley and out to the front straightaway. And even when I go back today, it's like we were there for the SRO 8-hour race in October that ended after darkness. So, it was late, right? And stood out there on the front straightaway with no one around, just standing on the bricks at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And it's just, again, all those spirits, those ghosts, whatever you want to call them, they're there and you feel them. And it's not like they're talking to you, but they're there. They're just there. And literally, when I say that, the hair on my arm stands up. But it's a magical place, and obviously a magical event.
There's a video of, and Scott probably knows what I'm going to bring up, Tony Stewart. He was at the museum and he was talking to Doug Bowles about, apparently when he ran Indy, there were a lot of drivers didn't stay inside the track, like in the motorhome lot. But he did. I think he had got back from Charlotte from doing the double.
One of the doubles.
Yeah, it was a double. He came back and he said when he got out of the car, like he was just standing out there, and he said the whole place, like he just heard all this noise. And it was just so loud. And he was like, I thought I was about to see somebody, but there was no one there. Like he was just talking. Yeah. It was just really crazy. And Doug Bowles said, obviously, a lot of people say stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I know it. again, it can sound kind of corny, but it's real. See, and now if Tony Stewart said it, then it's got to be real. So,
Oh yeah.
I feel like I'm in good company now.
Right. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, for myself personally, I know for Aaron, he has similar experience. I mean, any person we've really ever talked to who goes to the Speedway, when you go through the tunnel, pop up in front of the museum, just there's something about it, and I don't know what it is. I mean, my entire life has been in one way or another tied to that place. I don't live here if it isn't for that place. My dad worked on Indy cars, so our journey in life brought us here, and there's everything I have in my life is essentially due to one place.
Yeah. I mean, it's magical. And, like I said, Le Mans is the same to me. It's, you just know the history, and there's something about, we're so spoiled in this country. You go to the town of Le Mans, where you're probably staying when you're there. And, you walk down these narrow streets that are the way that they were in the 40s when World War II was going on. And you see the scars literally to this day of bullet holes in these big stone buildings and stuff. And you think about that history that's there. And then you think about the race. And first time I ever went, David Hobbs was with us, and we went driving in, and he goes, "Oh, this is White House." And I went, "What do you mean this is White House?" And he goes, "That street we just crossed, that's White House. That's White House Bend." And I'm like, no. That can't be. It's like a narrow 2-lane road with a giant crown in it and a little white house. Oh my God, it is White House. And I'm like, I can't imagine that, David. And he goes, yeah, imagine it in a GT40 or a 917 Porsche at 200 miles an hour in the nighttime, and I'm like, you guys were nuts. And as he said, we didn't know any better. I mean, you think about that through all the historical cars, and you look at some of these cars that people drove and you think, my God, they were crazy. Well, they didn't know any better. And Le Mans was the same way. You think about the guys who went there and drove these cars that you look at today and go, I would never get in that. Well, to them, it was the latest and greatest and, the best car that you could be in. What do you mean you wouldn't drive it? And
right.
It's just the history that's there. And when you, like I said, I kind of won't say I'm a World War II buff, but, it was a special time in the place of the world. And to kind of be in those areas where a lot of that stuff went down. And you think, it wasn't that long ago, they found, there's like a 200 or 300 pound bomb.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
When they were doing a new building site, there's still part of that there. Right. So, like I said, that history is pretty special.
So after kind of, you wrap up your racing career, like how did you get involved in the broadcasting?
Obviously I talk a lot. It's a blessing and a curse, right? Maybe I get it from my dad since he was an attorney and a litigator. So I did, the last IndyCar season I ran with any regularity was 1993, and I did the 500 and one other race in 94. Then I was late, but I thought, well, maybe I should look at sports cars. So I ran Trans Am in 95 and ran with Greg Pickett's team, which was, the whole Pickett family is just a hoot to be around, but ran with them, ran Camaros, and we were doing the race let me back up for a second. After I won the Atlantic Championship in 1990, the group that was televising the Atlantic races asked if I wanted to do color commentary for the Atlantic races in 91. And since they didn't really conflict with any of my Indy Light stuff, I said, sure. So that was my first taste of television, was doing color commentary. I think I only did it for a year because I really wanted to concentrate on the IndyCar stuff. I may have done it for 2, but and then I was out of it for a couple of years. And when I was doing Trans Am, we were at Road America, and it was a different production company doing the races then. Guy named John Mullen, who was one of the originators behind the American Sports Cavalcade and all that kind of stuff. And just a super guy. I mean, a dear friend and one of the best producers in motorsports, bar none. But he grabbed 5 drivers and took us out to 5 different corners. And for the show, he didn't want to do the same old boring track map. He wanted to take drivers out to corners and let the drivers explain, the corner. And he would just do them in succession. He had somebody in turn 1, somebody in turn 5, somebody in 8. I think he had somebody in the carousel, maybe, in different places around the racetrack. And then he took those narratives and put them together and did the track map with them for the broadcast. And after we did it, he goes, "Wow, you can actually talk." Like, don't give, race car drivers a bad rap, John. Yeah, a lot of us can talk. He goes, "No, you did really good. You seem comfortable." And I said, "Well, I've done a little bit of television." He goes, "Well, would you like to do some more?" It turned out he was doing the Atlantic broadcast from that point on, and was like, "Would you be interested in doing some of the Atlantic stuff?" And I'm like, "Sure." So really, I owe it to John Mullen, because John is the one who got me back into doing television on a regular basis. And I give him credit because he was very vocal about what you did right and what you did wrong. That offends some people. To me, I can't fix it if I don't know about it, so our personalities went pretty well together, even when he would yell at me. And I've got 3 hours worth of funny stories about John Mullen doing television, but we got along fabulously because of that. I wanted to learn, and he wanted to do good television. And then Speed Vision, was getting going in the day. And then David Lee, who was a producer at Speed Vision at the time, called one day and said, "Hey, are you interested in doing the runoffs for Speed Vision?" And then did the runoffs, and just, one thing kind of led to another. And then there was this family of us at Speed Vision that went on to Speed, that went on to Fox. And that was Lee Diffie and Calvin Fish, Chris Neville and Dorsey Schrader, and myself were kind of this core. Guy Hobbs was in there for a while, but there was this core group of us that, we were so incredibly lucky, because not only were we working and making a living doing television, we all became incredibly close friends to this day. And obviously Calvin and Lee, work for NBC, where I do my stuff now, and still great friends. And, it's a long way away from the Heart of Texas Kart Club in Waco, Texas, where it all started. And from a guy who thought that he would probably be a businessman or something like that, and just enjoy going to the races as either a club racer on the weekends or as a fan sitting in the stands. So when I say I'm 1 in a million, I am. I'm 1 in a million. I won the lottery. Had opportunities to do all these things, and I'm fortunate I still get to do them.
And I think when you look at just the Indy 500 alone, you look at the number of people who race in the Indy 500, the number is pretty low. And
It's low.
Very low. And the drivers that are still alive that, racing the 500, it's extremely low. And think about all the, millions of kids, right, that dream of driving in the Indy 500.
Yeah. And it's, and it's just, it's still just magical. And I still have to kind of slap myself. Was at Daytona for the Rolex, and I was walking out of the media center, and was going to head back to where our trailers were, our office trailers were, to do some work. And I went walking in to the garage area that's in the back, the higher numbered garages. And walking through the gate was Roger Penske and his son. And I'm like, oh man, there's Roger. And to this day, I'm still like, oh, there's Roger. and it always floors me when Roger Penske says, hey, Brian, how's it going? And I'm like, why does Roger Penske know my name? You know, I mean, and he's just an absolutely freaking amazing human being. But, those are the kind of moments where you just kind of have to slap yourself and you just go, I'm one lucky guy. I really am. I'm not lucky that Roger Penske knows my name. I'm lucky that I get to be someplace around people like that you admired so much before you ever thought you would have an opportunity to do it. And not only have you done it, but you've done it okay, because Roger Penske says hello and calls you by name. So funny, the metrics you use to measure things by, right?
Right.
There you go.
What would you say is your biggest piece of advice for any young, driver that wants to drive in the Indy 500?
You have to be the complete package. You just have to anymore. It's a bit, I mean, again, it literally and figuratively takes money to make the wheels go round. You have to be a business person. You just do. I think you need to have the mindset of, I need to find the corporate backing to make this work, and not rely on, hey, I just need to win races and I'll get picked up. There's not much racing in the world where that exists anymore. Yes, it happens a little bit here and there, but it's usually because somebody believed in you and helped you along the way. And because of that, you need to be prepared to understand business. You need to represent. I tell young guys in media training this: you may think it's funny at 15 years old to walk downstairs, or you may not even think about walking downstairs and kind of the off-color t-shirt that you've got on that has the colorful saying on the back of it that would make your mom blush. And you don't think about it. You go walking down into the lobby to eat breakfast, and you don't pay any attention to the woman that's sitting there at the table kind of looking at you like, oh my God, I can't believe someone would wear that. And you think nothing about it until you're standing there in your paddock the next day or later that day, and some guy comes walking up, and your team owner or your business person is so excited to introduce you to these people because they are potentially your ticket. And you look up and, oh my God, it's her. And she looks up and looks at you and goes, oh my God, it's him. It's like, you don't get a do-over. Every impression you make is an impression. The first impression, it's real, and it's got to be good. And you have to understand the business side of it. You have to understand the B2B side of business and how it gets done in the paddock. And you've got to be willing to be a part of it. The work on the racetrack, the driving the car, that's the fun part. And it's, I don't know, maybe it's 10%, maybe it's 15%. The other part is being in a gym and being physically fit. I think you need to continue to read and study and immerse yourself in something so that mentally you're tough and you keep going. I was reading about Ramon Grosjean, who just got his pilot's license and bought a plane. And he did that. And I admire him. I'm a pilot too, but it took me much longer. I think he started last fall, and he's at 0 hours, and he's now a multi-engine IFR certified pilot. He also has the wherewithal to buy the airplane and afford the training. But the point is, he immersed himself in something. And that's what you do as a driver. You immerse yourself in the driving, but you've got to find other things so that your mind is multifaceted, and that you look at things from different angles, and you don't become complacent. You look at the guys who've been around for a long time. I have no idea what Scott Dixon's stock portfolio looks like, but I'm going to imagine that there's some stuff in there that he's interested in. I'm going to imagine that he may own a couple of businesses, I don't know, or co-own a couple of businesses, things that maybe when he stops driving, he'll have an opportunity to be involved in. He may be in a financial situation where, he may be in a financial situation where he doesn't need to find something else to do when he stops driving. But, other drivers aren't as fortunate. They stop driving long before they intended to, and there needs to be something else there. And if you've immersed yourself in the business side of motorsport, there may be something business-wise that keeps you in the sport, but not as a driver. So find other things and be complete, but really that's not racing specific. That's the real world anyway, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. You hear the stories, of Mr. Hendrick. Like they say that any guy that works for him, any person that works for him, can go and talk to him, ask him business questions, ask him any questions at any time. And you've heard some of the same things about Roger. And
Right.
I feel like if you're a driver, I mean, you kind of got to do that, right?
You have to.
You got to. I mean, in what other time in your life are you going to be around people who are
you've got the
so wildly successful?
The brightest, most successful people right there that you can talk to them about other things other than the race car.
Right.
You've got this world of information that's there, but it's no different than a football player. You're one hit away from ending your career one game in. There has to be more. You have to make sure that you're complete. And I mean, it's so easy to focus on the fun, but I don't know. I mean, the guys work out harder today than I did, but I was in the gym 5 days a week, 2.5, 3 hours a day. I mean, you had to. I was joking about opening a bottle of wine earlier, but it's like I didn't drink alcohol from 2 weeks before the first race until the season was over. I didn't drink alcohol at all, period. And so it was like you dedicate yourself to making yourself better and doing the things that you need to do to make it work. And some of them aren't fun. I've got a 19 and a 22-year-old son who are in college, and they're like, yeah, this sucks. I don't understand why I have to do this class. And I'm like, right. You have to do it because the curriculum says you have to do it. You don't make the curriculum. You're going to have to do things in your work life that your boss tells you to do that you don't think are worthwhile. But guess what?
Or life in general. Right.
Yeah, it's life in general. Exactly. If you want to stay employed, you better do them. So right. it's like there are those things in preparing for racing that you have to do as well. The workouts, the diet, the reading, the studying, all of that stuff. And a lot of it doesn't have anything to do with driving a race. But if you want to be successful, you better be complete.
Absolutely. Well, I don't have anything else. Do you have anything else, Scott?
I don't. It's been, I mean, I've really enjoyed this, and thank you so much for your time. And we hope
my pleasure.
Hope to have you on again sometime. And Aaron, are you going to give him an open invitation
for
your go-karting?
Oh yeah.
God.
If you're ever in Indianapolis, we actually we have a partnership with a local indoor go-karting place. And we've been racing some former drivers and current drivers.
Nothing good can come from that.
It's been good. It's been good so far.
Jimmy Kite is absolutely hooked too. We've had Donnie Beechler.
That's like taking an alcoholic back into a bar. Don't invite me to do things like that. You guys have been awesome. I appreciate it. I had a ball, and grab me at a racetrack the next time you see me, or give me a call sometime and we'll chat. But I'm going to go finish my spaghetti and enjoyed it.
Now, you said earlier you're gonna send Aaron some of that sauce, right? Is that was that the deal with me?
I don't think you heard me a minute ago when I said I have a 19 and a 22-year-old in my house. There will be no sauce left. Trust me.
Oh man, it was an absolute pleasure, Brian.
Yep.
Brian, there is one question I did. There was something I forgot. You've kind of joked around a little bit about talking about these other guys with all their talents and that, and obviously you're very talented, or you wouldn't have done the things you did. Now, just talking to you, would you say that one thing that you were really good at was that you understood how to minimize the things you knew you weren't good at and maximize the things you knew you were good at?
I think that's an excellent point. It's an excellent point. I mean, my deal was I wanted to finish races and score points and finish as high in championships as I possibly could. I wasn't a risk taker, and I wasn't a risk taker because I'll go back to, I didn't come from a racing family. I didn't understand how it worked. I was 23 years old when I sat down in a go-kart the first time. So I didn't have a bunch of experience to pull from. Everything was new to me. And the people I watched, the Jackie Stewarts, the Bobby Rahalls, those guys were the guys that I looked to. And I looked at them, not the Gilles Villeneuves of the world and that kind of stuff, but the Jackie Stewart, who I always thought was the thinker, Lauda to some extent, who was the thinker, Rahal, who certainly was the thinker. He didn't look like a race car driver. He was this speckled guy that was, driving for Red Roof's End, but they were thinkers. And it was like, you can think your way out of a lot of stuff, if you'll just focus. And that was probably my stronger suit. I didn't have the experience, so consequently I wasn't as willing to take risks. And I measured my risks very differently, which made me more consistent with my finishes. I remember, just briefly, and then I gotta go, but I was doing some truck races for Fox, and Phil Parsons and Todd Bodine were in the booth with me. And I was just filling in, I think I did 4 or 5 races, and it was like 2/3 of the way through the season, 3/4 of the way through the season. And the championship was, coming to light. And I can't remember who the players were at the time, but I'm like, okay, we're at Atlanta Motor Speedway. And I keep talking about points, and scoring points and moving on to the next one. And Phil is looking at me like I am out of my mind. And Todd is going, well, that makes sense, Phil. I mean, if you get 0 points for crashing out, or, you get whatever, and finally we're in a break. And I said, so when we come back, do we want to talk about the 86 truck and, how he's leading the championship, but he's 12th on this restart with 5 laps to go? How much do you risk? Are you really going to go try to win this race? Or are you going to be smart, and walk out of here with points? Because it's going to happen. There's going to be a crash. What do you do? Bill looked at me and goes, if you say that one more time, I'm going to punch you in the throat. But it's just his different mindset than mine. I was the points guy. I was the let's score points and move on. And he came from, a hard-nosed racing background of win every freaking race that you can. My counterpoint to that would be the ones that you can. Don't try crashing, or don't crash trying to win a race that you can't win. My friend Dorsey Schrader always used to say, if you've got a 3rd place car and you finish 3rd, you won. If you have a 3rd place car and you finish 2nd, you had a really lucky day. And if you had a 3rd place car and you finish 5th, well, you're a wanker and you got some work to do. But, it's just a different mindset and how you approach it. So
I agree with all that. Yeah. I contend that if you're a fast driver without the discipline, if a steady driver can stay on him, push him a little bit, he'll give you that spot.
Yeah,
you just got to.
They're fast race car drivers and good race car drivers.
That's right.
Good race car drivers are fast. Fast ones aren't necessarily good. They end up in the fence a lot.
There you go.
You got to have the balance.
Well, Brian, thank you again so much, and I hope that spaghetti's good.
We're about to find out.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you,
guys.